Zahara Bello learned to braid hair when she couldn't even reach the market counters. She was 6 years old and lived in Mushin, a neighborhood where noise was a constant, the rumble of danfos, those yellow and green buses that rattled over every pothole, the shouts of suya vendors, and the hum of electric generators that roared like beasts in the night. Her mother, Bello, had an akara stand on the edge of the road where she fried bean balls in recycled oil, sweating among thick vapors. Zahara spent her afternoons sitting on a broken bench, surrounded by her younger sisters, playing with their hair as if it were threads of magic. At first, she only made ponytails and simple braids, using old shoelaces and rusty sewing needles. But with time, her talent flourished. She invented patterns that imitated the cracks in dry earth or the waves of Bar Beach. Her imagination was her only school, and her hands were her only map. The women in the neighborhood began to notice. Mrs. Ade, a midwife known throughout the area, was the first to pay her. She offered a red plastic comb with a broken handle in exchange for Zahara to straighten her dreadlocks before going to the temple. Your hands have the gift of the ancients, she murmured as Zahara divided her hair into clean paths, decorating the ends with glass beads that tinkled as she moved. Your braids tell stories that men have forgotten. But gifts didn't fill stomachs. At 12 years old, Zahara already walked alone to the Balogun market. She bought cheap synthetic hair and soaked it in black tea to give it a more realistic tone. At home, she slept on a worn out foam mattress, under which she hid a cloth with copper coins and crumpled bills, her small escape fund. Her father, a laborer with lungs full of asbestos dust, coughed every night as if spitting out bricks. Meanwhile, Zahara braided under the light of a kerosene lantern, dreaming of a place where beauty didn't hurt so much. It was on one of those nights, while shelling roasted peanuts with her sister, that she found her first symbol of hope, a used magazine wrapping peanuts. On the cover, a woman with skin like polished ebony combed a Nigerian model's hair with braids so long and perfect they looked like cascades of obsidian. Mbali Okeke, the caption read. Mbali's divine locks, where tradition meets royalty. Zahara carefully tore out the page, folded it in four, and hid it under her mattress next to her small treasures. That image wasn't just a dream, it was a map to escape Mushin. At 20 years old, Zahara already had warrior's hands. Her fingers were hardened from years of tension on cotton threads, her nails were split from separating hair strands, and the skin on her palms was toughened like old leather. She hadn't studied hairstyling, but her experience was another university, the one of mud, smoke, and whispered confessions. She had transformed the backyard of her house, a modest unpainted block construction, into an improvised salon. Two plastic chairs, a broken mirror ripped from an abandoned car, and a parasol hung over a broomstick composed her small temple. The walls smelled of black soap and rancid coconut oil, but the braids that came out of there were works of art. The clients paid as they could: bags of rice, liters of red oil, candles for power outages, or sometimes something more valuable: secrets. My husband beats me when he smells another man on my skin, confessed Mrs. Ngozi one afternoon, while Zahara covered a bruise on her neck with an elaborate Ghanaian style suku. Zahara didn't respond. She just braided with more force, as if she could seal the pain inside each knot. Every head she touched told her a story: broken women, strong women, invisible women. Each one of them deposited their trust in Zahara as if her fingers were sacred. And then Kioma arrived. She was 17 years old, with acrylic nails the color of ripe mangoes, and a dress that smelled of perfumes from expensive stores on Victoria Island. She walked like someone who had forgotten what it was like to live without air conditioning. But what caught Zahara's attention wasn't her attitude, nor her refined accent. It was her hair. Kioma's braids were impossible, thin as silver threads, braided with such symmetry that they seemed woven by spirits. There was a hidden pattern in them, something ancestral and modern at the same time. They seemed to move with the wind, although there was no breeze. Mbali Okeke did them, Kioma whispered, as if pronouncing the name of a goddess. She looked around with unease, lowering her voice. They say her salon is blessed by the Orishas, but not everything is as it seems. After the session, I dreamed of women crying under the earth. Zahara remained silent, but that night, as soon as she closed her salon, she pulled out her flashlight and spread out on the floor the bills she had been saving for years. She counted them one by one. 150,000 naira. It was just enough to pay for a 3-month intensive course at Mbali's Divine Locks. Just 3 months, 3 full moons, and maybe a new life. At dawn, she said goodbye without words. Her mother watched her from the kitchen, stirring cornmeal porridge with a wooden spoon. Ikoyi is not Lagos, Zahara, Bello said, handing her a small amulet wrapped in purple fabric. Inside there was guinea pepper, a parrot feather, and a baby tooth from her grandmother. Ikoyi is a forest of shadows disguised as a garden. May these dead eyes guide you when the living fail you. Zahara didn't cry. She put the amulet in her dress pocket, adjusted her backpack, and walked towards the Danfo station. Her heart beat like an Orisha drum. She knew she was crossing an invisible border, and once she entered Mbali's world, there would be no turning back. The taxi stopped in front of a restored colonial mansion, the kind hidden along the quiet avenues of Ikoyi, behind gates that don't open without an invitation. Zahara stepped out with a tight heart and a soul wrapped in sweat. The breeze smelled of expensive flowers and restrained danger. The house had white columns with cracks disguised under fresh paint. Purple bougainvilleas climbed the walls like flowery serpents, and a stone fountain spilled water with a murmur that wasn't entirely reassuring. When Zahara rang the bell, an electric jolt shot through her palm. The gate opened with a metallic groan. Inside, the air conditioning was a slap from another life. The marble floor gleamed like polished skin. The mirrors, huge, with golden Baroque frames, were arranged so that each of Zahara's steps multiplied to infinity. But in some corners of the reflection, something was off. A shadow too long, a movement where no one had moved, a silhouette that wasn't hers. Welcome, Zahara Bello. The voice was soft and sharp like a razor blade. Mbali Okeke emerged from a side door, gliding more than walking. She wore a rust-colored dress like dried blood under the sun, and a necklace of blue beads that chimed in rhythm with her breathing. Her skin was pure obsidian, flawless, but the most unsettling part was her eyes, golden, liquid, unblinking, as if they held a tiny, cruel sun. You're the girl from Mushin, she said, taking Zahara's hands and examining them like a jeweler evaluates an uncut diamond. Root hands. Here, beauty hurts. Will you endure it? Zahara didn't answer. She only nodded, swallowing her fear like hot oil. A tall woman appeared behind Mbali. She had tribal scars on her cheeks, a sleeveless black robe, and the expression of stone. Amina will show you your station, Mbali said. Zahara was led to the back of the salon, near a window that looked out onto a garden that had once been beautiful. Now it was a wasteland of cracked earth where even weeds seemed to have given up. The other apprentices were already at work. Three girls from Abuja, with polished nails, perfumed skin, and phones that vibrated silently. A mature woman whispering to something invisible. And in the darkest corner, a young woman with nose piercings and a gaze like a knife. I'm Funmi, she said, handing Zahara a cup of ginger tea. Don't drink anything after nightfall, and if you ask about the ones who are missing, well, don't ask. Zahara took the tea. The heat of the ginger loosened her tongue and her soul, but the taste left something else. A sour premonition, like she was already inside something too big. At the other end of the salon, Mbali attended to a client wrapped in blue silk. The woman laughed without laughing, with scalpel lips and false lashes like wings. Zahara watched as Mbali braided without looking, murmuring words in a language Zahara didn't know, but one her grandmother had once spoken in dreams. The mirrors in the salon captured everything, but returned something else. Sometimes Zahara thought she saw, reflected behind her, a different figure, a version of herself that smiled. Too much. And thus began the 3 months that would change her destiny, not like school, not like a job, but like an initiation. After all, at Mbali's Divine Locks, it wasn't just about beauty, it was about power. And power, Zahara would learn very soon, comes at a price. In Ikoyi, hair wasn't an accessory, it was armor, a banner, a curse. Zahara understood this in her first week, when a senator arrived at the salon wrapped in an Ankara robe and the scent of power. She demanded a koroba braided with 24-karat gold thread, not for vanity, for war. I want my hair to speak before I do, she said, chewing kola nut. Let those vipers in parliament see I still have venom. Mbali braided in silence, injecting Botox into the senator's temples between strokes, like vaccinating against weakness. The senator didn't flinch. Zahara, from her corner, felt the world sliding down a slippery slope. The next day, an influencer with tattooed eyebrows and a surgically snatched waist asked for something even darker, even darker. I need micro cameras inside the extensions. Make it look casual, but record everything. My ex says I'm crazy. This time I want proof. Mbali nodded, unsurprised. Amina brought out a small case with devices no bigger than ants. Zahara understood then. At Mbali's Divine Locks, they weren't selling beauty. They were crafting strategy. The apprentices rotated through silent stations, sewing secrets into every knot. Zahara practiced classic styles on synthetic skinned mannequins, but even those plastic eyes seemed to look at her with pity. The true horror came in her 3rd month. Mbali approached one morning with her feline grace, her dress the color of sunset blood. Today you'll have a real client. A test. The client was a sweet, trembling young woman with an engagement ring as large as an empty promise. Zahara was to style the Orisa look, inspired by ancestral deities, a braid pattern she knew like it was born in her blood. But that morning her fingers betrayed her. The natural extensions, soft as wind at first, turned coarse. They tangled, refused to obey. Is this a joke? The bride-to-be snapped at her reflection. I look like a broom. Zahara felt the ground collapse beneath her, but Mbali, with a smile like a sliced shadow, stepped in. She took the failed braids with surgical grace and dipped them into a crystal bowl filled with murky water and golden powder that seemed to move on its own. When she pulled them out, they shimmered like newborn sunlight. Sorry, darling, she said. Apprentices need motivation. The client was delighted, almost hypnotized. Zahara stood frozen. That night in the bathroom, she found Funmi sitting on the floor, trembling. Her makeup had melted down her cheeks as if she'd cried acid. They inject you, she whispered, showing her left forearm. Here, right here. The marks were lines, but not random. They formed a pattern, like a map, like a spell. So your hands won't shake, so you forget. Zahara touched her own arm, suddenly aware of the tiny sting she had felt days earlier during a massage from Amina. Then she understood. It wasn't just her technique that was improving. It was obedience. It was erasure. She left the bathroom dizzy, the ginger's warmth in her throat now turned to poison. She looked out at the dead garden and thought she saw something move beneath the earth, as if the roots were trying to break free. In her room, Zahara pulled out her mother's amulet, the pepper, the feather, the tooth, small things, but real. Beauty had a price. But Zahara was beginning to suspect that here, the currency was the soul. Zahara began to notice the cracks, not in the salon's walls, which were immaculate white, nor in the mirrors with their golden frames gleaming like stained glass in a church. The cracks were in the silence, in the pauses between each braid, in the glances the apprentices avoided exchanging, in the names that stopped being mentioned without explanation. It all started with a white cat. In Lagos, cats don't roam freely. They're elusive, invisible, almost mythological. But that afternoon, one appeared between the shelves of the drying area, eyes like saucers of curdled milk, walking like it had crossed worlds. Zahara followed without thinking, as if she knew the cat would lead her to something that had already begun seeking her. The animal slipped through a half-open door she had never noticed before. She pushed it gently. Beyond it, a staircase of decaying wood descended into darkness. The smell hit her first. Stale incense, mold, and something else. Metallic, electric, like an open wound. She went down. The basement was wide, lit by flickering fluorescent lights that blinked like nervous eyelids. On either side, stacked in neat rows, were boxes, all labeled in black letters: premium human hair, origin, India. Virgin hair, ethical donation, ritual collection, high value. But that wasn't what stopped her. It was the sound, a rhythmic brushing, almost like whispers, braiding, weaving, pulling. Behind a plastic curtain, she found the unthinkable. Cages, three women, ashen skin, sunken eyes, scalps shaved to a shine. Their fingers moved with unnatural speed, braiding strands of hair into wigs that seemed to breathe. Zahara covered her mouth. One of the women looked up. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She only whispered, "They captured us in Kano. They told us that here our suffering would make the hair stronger, more expensive." On her wrist was a scar shaped like a five-pointed star, and in her eyes a plea as old as time. Zahara stepped back, stumbled over a box. The sound was small, but enough. Hands grabbed her from behind. "What are you doing here?" It was Tunda, the delivery boy, sweating, with a bag full of unmarked bottles. She broke free with an elbow, but he stopped her with a single sentence. "If you want to help them, you need proof. Looking isn't enough." Zahara stared into his eyes. For the first time she noticed one was slightly darker than the other, as if he carried a shard of shadow inside him. "Who are you really?" she murmured. "Someone who was an apprentice too, but refused to forget." Before letting her go, Tunde slipped something into her pocket, a small bottle with crimson liquid and a tiny braid floating inside. "When the time comes, rub it into your work and make noise, as much noise as you can." Zahara climbed the stairs, her heart pounding like a war drum. In the reflection of the nearest mirror, she swore she saw a shadow behind her, but when she turned, there was no one. That night she didn't sleep. In front of her bed, she lined up the pieces of her own war braid, her mother's amulet, Tunda's red potion, the promise of the voiceless women, and the memory of Mbali, always smiling, always watching. The truth was beneath the mirrors, and it was time to bring it to light. The city dressed in white, The city dressed in white. It was the day of the Ayo festival, and the streets of Lagos pulsed beneath the feet of the dancers, hooded figures in pristine white robes, carrying ornate staffs and wearing masks without expression. They looked like ghosts celebrating under the sun, blessing and cursing at once. A ritual veil had descended over the city, perfect for what Zahara had planned. Everything had to happen in the chaos. Neka, her childhood friend, arrived right on time for her appointment. Like an actress stepping into a well rehearsed role, she wore dark sunglasses, an expensive Ankara dress rented for the occasion, and the air of a rich woman who knows the price of her beauty. Zahara greeted her with a tense smile. Her hands were cold, though the air conditioning was off. You go in, smile, and ask the questions. Don't improvise, Zahara whispered as she prepared the tools. I'll do the rest. What if she suspects? Neka asked, removing her glasses. Zahara showed her a jar of honey. This is the recorder. If Mbali talks, we'll have proof. What Neka didn't know was that there was another, more dangerous ingredient. A crimson lotion prepared with Tunde's help, mixed with the liquid Zahara had received in the basement. She had hidden it among the scalp massage products. Her plan hinged on one calculated act, a burst of color. Mbali appeared in the salon later than usual, wrapped in a burnt gold caftan that shimmered as if aflame. Her golden eyes settled on Neka with feline curiosity. What a fine face! Who referred her? She asked as she walked past Zahara. A politician from Abuja, Zahara lied. He wants something exclusive. Umbali laughed. Her laughter was always fake, but never empty. Those who want exclusivity must pay with more than just money. During the session, Zahara massaged Neka's scalp with slow, almost ceremonial movements. As she did, she carefully slid the crimson lotion onto the hair roots, disguised among essential oils. Neka, sticking to the script, asked in a silky voice, What's in that special skincare treatment? I heard you use unique injections, family secrets. Mbali approached. The syringe appeared in her fingers as if by magic. Inside, an amber liquid shimmered in the midday light. It's an ancestral formula, she whispered. But you, special girl, might receive it if you know how to keep quiet. And then it happened. The braids began to change color. First one strand, then two. As if a drop of blood had fallen into a still pond, the red spread from Neka's scalp, dyeing her entire head of hair. The clients stood up in shock. Several pulled out their phones. The spectacle was too strange to ignore. Mbali, look what you did to her, shouted a woman draped in pearls. Mbali tried to turn off the lights. Zahara was faster. She had left her phone hidden on the counter, already live streaming on Twitter and TikTok. Mbali's divine locks, beauty or enslavement. The police, alerted by an anonymous tip from Tunde, arrived in the middle of the uproar. The Ayo dancers were passing right in front of the salon, their steps slow and ceremonial as if witnessing another ritual. The doors were broken down, the basement cages opened, the women were rescued amidst cries and sobs. But Mbali had vanished. She left no trace, not through the back door, nor down the halls. Only her office remained open, as if she had known the end was coming. Inside were jars of cosmetics, contracts with fake names, and an altar, ebony figurines with human hair, extinguished black candles, a photo of Zahara carefully cut out. The eyes on the image had been burned with acid. Today, Zahara runs Ayalode Locks, a small salon in Mushin where beauty doesn't hurt, enslave, or silence. She teaches girls and mothers, survivors and dreamers how to braid. She tells them stories about braids as maps, as promises, about the power of hands when used to create, not to capture, But some nights when the generator shuts down and the street falls into darkness, she swears she hears laughter, not her clients, older ones, behind the mirrors, within the silence. On her desk, there's an envelope with no return address. Inside, a blonde braid, so perfect it still feels warm, as if freshly cut, and a note written in red ink. Roots never die, little Bello. They only wait underground.